Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Monday, May 6th. Today is day 213. There's a lot happening today. The biggest news at the moment is that Hamas's political leader, Ismail Haniyeh, said that the organization has accepted Egypt and Qatar's ceasefire hostage release deal proposal. The organization's acceptance of this proposal, it was presented by Egypt and Qatar. The Hamas source said that the group received guarantees that Israel would not renew operations in Gaza after the ceasefire deal. Before the Hamas announcement, several reports suggested that Hamas had hardened its position in the wake of Prime Minister Netanyahu's statements that he and the Israeli army would attack Rafah, regardless of whether or not there was a ceasefire agreement. That was reported in the New York Times. And also the Hamas rocket attacks yesterday near the Kerem Shalom crossing, which killed 4 Israeli soldiers. Reports had indicated that there was an impasse in terms of negotiations. Now, we don't know if Israel has accepted the deal. So that's where things stand right now. Israeli Foreign Minister Katz said that Israel agreed to significant concessions in negotiations with Hamas, but that Hamas has repeatedly refused. The U.S. continues to believe that a hostage deal is the best way to preserve the lives of hostages, to avoid an invasion in Rafah, where more than 1 million people have been displaced and are sheltering. So those talks continue. They're ongoing right now. According to Kirby, the National Security Council spokesperson, the Mossad chief Barnea said, "We're obligated to return the hostages from the tunnels of death in Gaza. The Mossad and I, as its head, will turn over every stone to bring them back home." Now, at the same time, it also was reported that Israel has begun the evacuation of about 100,000 civilians in the area of the southern part of Rafah. The southern district of Rafah has been ordered to evacuate immediately. Those evacuations have begun. They're seeking to move that population to a humanitarian zone, saying that the Israeli military will operate with, quote, extreme force, end quote, in those areas. Israel has been clear that they are determined to invade Rafah. That's still the sticking point, it seems to be, on ceasefire negotiations. So honestly, we don't really know what's happening. We don't know if the hostage negotiations are completely broken down. We don't know if they're right on the brink of being accepted. Suhail al-Hindi, a member of Hamas's political bureau, told the Post that Rafah will become a graveyard for Israeli soldiers. Our people and resistance remain resilient, he said. Palestinians residing east of the city of Rafah received phone calls, voice messages telling them to evacuate, head for the Al-Mawasi area on the Gaza shore, or Khan Yunis. Flyers also instructed residents to evacuate. One of the big questions continues to be, where are people supposed to go? The area is so incredibly populated that there is limited ability for people to be able to move. Israeli orders to relocate are, quote, inhumane, end quote, and risk exposing them to further danger. So the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. Medical sources in Rafah said that 26 people were killed in the last 24 hours because of a series of Israeli airstrikes on 11 buildings and houses in the area. In a phone call with President Biden, Netanyahu said he would ensure that the Kerem Shalom crossing would be open for humanitarian aid. The White House said Biden reiterated his opposition, that President Biden is opposed to a Rafah operation. In a phone call with his counterpart, Lloyd Austin, our Secretary of Defense met with the Defense Minister Gallant in Israel, saying that Hamas had left Israel no choice but to begin the offensive in Rafah. The two also discussed the ongoing hostage negotiations and humanitarian aid efforts, according to the Pentagon. Senior Hamas official Abu Zori told Reuters that Israel's Rafah evacuation order ahead of an expected offensive is a dangerous escalation and would have consequences. Hamas later said that any military operation in Rafah would not be a picnic for the IDF. The Belgian Prime Minister is attempting to advance economic sanctions on Israel in a joint effort with other European countries due to Israel's threatened military operation in Rafah. Saudi Arabia's foreign ministry warned Israel against targeting Rafah as a part of what it called a, quote, bloody and systematic campaign, end quote, to storm all areas of Gaza and to displace its people. Egypt is raising its preparedness level in the northern Sinai Peninsula ahead of a possible Rafah invasion. One of the concerns is that if people are displaced from Rafah, that they could actually just push through the barriers into the northern Sinai. Egypt's foreign ministry warned against such an offensive and called on Israel to show restraint at this sensitive point in time. The Palestinian Authority has said that the U.S. has a role to play in preventing the, quote, massacre of a potential Israeli invasion in Rafah, according to Palestinian News. According to the Ministry of Health, the death toll in Gaza is 34,735 Palestinians killed and those wounded is 78,108. Israel estimates 1,200 people were killed on October 7th during the Hamas attacks. More than 300 soldiers were killed that day, and it says 267 soldiers have been killed since the launch of its military operation in Gaza. One of the big questions that's been reported since then is what to do with all of the rubble in Gaza. It's believed that there could be more than 10,000 people missing under the rubble, and rising temperatures can accelerate the decomposition of bodies that are missing. This would perpetuate and accelerate the spread of disease, according to the UN Humanitarian Affairs Office. And all relevant stakeholders are called to urgently intervene to allow the entry of needed equipment, including bulldozers and excavators, to avert a public health catastrophe, facilitate dignified burials, and to save the lives of those who are injured. In addition, sifting through the wreckage is no simple task. Israel has dumped a huge amount of ordnance on the territory. According to the UN Mine Action Program in the Palestine territory, the amount of unexploded missiles and bombs lying in the rubble is unprecedented since World War II. Apparently, there are some 37 million tons of rubble. That's more than what has been generated in the war between Ukraine and Russia, and 800,000 tons of asbestos and other contaminants exists in the rubble in Gaza, according to the UN agency. Over the weekend, campus protests have continued. They now seem to have a second wind. Students have been protesting and walking out of graduations. Police cleared a pro-Palestinian encampment at USC for a second time. Dozens were arrested this weekend at the Art Institute of Chicago. Vassar protesters removed their tents after the college agreed to review their investments. And dozens of Indiana University graduates walked out during a commencement, as did students who were graduating at the University of Michigan. Echoing Vietnam protests, demonstrators at Kent State called for the university to divest, and the University of California, LA said on Sunday that it had created a new campus safety position as the school moved to reopen this week and examine what led to clashes between demonstrators. Over the weekend, 25 protesters at the University of Virginia were arrested after violent clashes with police. Law enforcement officers in riot gear surrounded a student encampment that the administration had said was prohibited. In the US, reports broke out that the Biden administration put a hold on a shipment of artillery or ammunition that was set to go to Israel. This was reported first by Axios. This would have been the first time since October 7th that the US had stopped a weapons shipment that was intended for the Israeli military. This incident raised serious concerns within the Israeli government and sent officials scrambling to understand why the shipment was withheld. President Biden was facing sharp criticism among Americans who opposed the support of Israel. The administration in February had asked Israel to provide assurances that US-made weapons were being used by the IDF forces according to international law. Israel provided a signed letter of assurances in March. The Israeli officials said the ammunition shipment to Israel was stopped last week. The White House and Pentagon did not comment. The Biden administration is highly concerned about the possible invasion of Rafah, as we just discussed. And Netanyahu released several statements in recent days stating that he still has every intention of invading Rafah. So there has been quite a bit of conversation about the significance of, does this indicate that the Biden administration might be shifting their policies? When White House spokesperson John Kirby told reporters that the Israeli leaders need to understand that President Biden is sincere when he talks about changes in US policy regarding the Gaza war, should they move ahead with ground operations in Rafah. I talked about this very issue last night on MSNBC. I had the opportunity to be on the Amen show. I'd encourage you to check that out. And my final comment is that yesterday was Orthodox Easter Sunday. Blessings to our Orthodox brothers and sisters. Some of our staff in Jerusalem had the opportunity to go to the Holy Fire service on Saturday. Attendance was limited this year in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, but in large part, other than the severe restrictions in worship, which were quite significant for Palestinian Christians who were not able to travel to Jerusalem, in large part, the weekend in terms of worship went without incident. Continue to pray that this Rafah invasion does not proceed. Pray that these negotiations for ceasefire deal and the release of hostages would go forward. And let us continue in our efforts towards a comprehensive ceasefire and towards peace.